slip away. Canada now produces close to 15% of the world's uranium. It controls more than 588,000 TU in recoverable reserves, enough to fuel reactors for decades. And here's the part that stings for Washington: nearly 27% of U.S. reactor demand is met by Canadian uranium.
Shortage or extra or excess oil always affects the market, the price immediately.
They are a nuclear energy superpower.
Canada isn't just another supplier. It is the largest foreign lifeline to the American nuclear fleet. But the real shock sits somewhere else. Canada is the only G7 country that can sell commercial uranium without the legal chains that bind the US. It can move faster, promise more, deliver with fewer political swings, and Ottawa knows it. Uranium is now embedded deep in its list of 31 strategic materials, not as a footnote, but as the backbone of a long-term resource strategy. So, a question hangs in the air, uncomfortable for some, unavoidable for others. When did Canada stop playing catch-up and start becoming the stabilizing force the nuclear world didn't see coming? As we begin, you can hit like and subscribe if you want to stay with the full picture. The details coming up change the meaning of everything we've seen so far.
Is also a significant market. So it fits into that. It also fits into the other objective of Canada becoming an energy superpower.
It's not about critical minerals. It's not about metallurgy on its own. It's about the reindustrialization of this country.
And once you see Canada stepping out of the shadows, the next shift becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't a story about producing more than the United States. It's about doing what the United States can't do right now, offering nuclear fuel without political aftershocks, without sanctions, without the volatility that has become baked into Washington's negotiations. Canada's rules are simple and firm. Uranium is for power generation, only monitored under strict IAEA safeguards. No geopolitical strings, no policy whiplash. In a market shaken by sudden restrictions and retaliatory measures, that clarity becomes an asset in itself. Contrast that with Washington. U.S. negotiations over strategic minerals have increasingly drawn criticism for feeling heavy-handed, according to several analysts. Deals become bargaining chips. Commitments fluctuate with each political cycle. And although the U.S. has poured more than $70 million into supporting Canadian critical minerals, it still cannot freely export commercial uranium due to its own legal constraints. That gap matters, especially now. The global uranium market is splitting in two: a low-cost but high-risk block tied to Russia and Kazakhstan, and a high-trust block anchored in OECD suppliers. In that divide, Canada lands squarely in the center of the stable camp. Not because it is the biggest, but because it is the most predictable among the major producers. So the question grows sharper as the market fractures: is Canada quietly becoming the anchor country others rely on to avoid the turbulence ahead? Thanks for staying with us so far. If these insights are useful, subscribing is the easiest way to keep up with future updates. But Canada's rise becomes even clearer when placed beside the opposite trend: the widening cracks in US-India relations. Before New Delhi ever looked toward Ottawa, it watched a strategic partnership turn into a commercial risk almost overnight. On August 6, 2025, Washington raised tariffs on Indian goods by an additional 25%, pushing the total to 50%. More than half of India's $87 billion exports to the US suddenly faced new uncertainty. New Delhi called the move unfair and unreasonable language that signaled a rare level of frustration. The contradiction only deepened the concern. While imposing tariffs on a broad set of Indian products, the U.S. carved out exemptions for pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and key minerals to protect its own supply chains. To India, the message was clear: when pressure rises, Washington shields what it needs and leaves partners exposed. For a country seeking decades-long nuclear fuel security, that unpredictability was too large a risk to ignore. And once trust in Washington wavered, India's next move followed almost naturally. A growing economy, the fastest among the G20, cannot afford uncertainty in its baseload power. It needs reliability, long-term guarantees, and a supplier insulated from sharp political turns. In that search, Canada started to look less like an alternative and more like the logical anchor. India already runs 17 reactors derived from the CANDU design, a technology built around natural uranium and highly compatible with Canadian supply. That compatibility matters. It lowers risk, simplifies procurement, and avoids the technical hurdles that come with switching fuel types. But the core issue is time. India needs contracts that stretch a decade or more to stabilize its nuclear expansion. The United States, constrained by legal restrictions and approval cycles, cannot easily commit to that horizon. Canada can, supported by large reserves, steady production costs, and a regulatory environment that keeps uranium strictly within civilian use. For New Delhi, choosing Canada is not about abandoning the U.S. It is about insulating its energy future from tariffs, political swings, and legal bottlenecks. In a sector where predictability is the currency of progress, Canada simply offered more of it. The shift becomes undeniable once the numbers enter the picture. What India and Canada are now approaching is not just another supply deal, it is a geopolitical pivot worth far more than its price tag. A 10-year, $2.8 billion uranium agreement supplied by Cameco signals something the market has not seen in decades, a major fuel contract going to someone other than the United States. For India, this isn't symbolic, it's structural. Securing a decade of stable uranium is a way to lock its energy future away from the turbulence of sanctions, tariff shocks, or dependence on the Russia-Kazakhstan corridor. And for Canada, the scale of the deal marks a line it has never crossed before. For the first time, Ottawa steps into a space that historically belonged to Washington quietly but decisively. The effects ripple outward. The restart of CEPA negotiations hints at a broader economic reset, with both sides eyeing a potential $50 billion trade relationship by 2030. Whether that projection holds or not, the signal is clear. Trust in long-term supply is shaping diplomatic and commercial priorities in ways that go beyond uranium alone. Taken together, this moment places Canada not just as a supplier, but as a country capable of securing the kind of strategic deals that once defaulted to the U.S. And the question now is how far this realignment can extend. The global uranium map is no longer a single landscape. It is splitting into two clear blocks. One is cheaper but risky, dominated by Russia and Kazakhstan. The other is smaller, cleaner, and built on trust, led by OECD suppliers. And within that second group, Canada is emerging as the most complete package, reliable, politically stable, and able to commit for the long haul. This shift is opening the door for Ottawa. Canada has set its sights on becoming the world's top uranium producer, using rising geopolitical risk to position itself as the anchor of a low-risk supply block. Long-term deals like the India arrangement help lock in market share for the next decade, creating a foundation other suppliers cannot easily match. It's a trend NATO members and several Asian economies are already responding to. With global supply chains under pressure, many see Canada as one of the few producers able to offer steady deliveries without the uncertainty tied to sanctions or political swings. The contrast with the United States is sharp. Washington needs years to rebuild its conversion capacity, while Canada can supply immediately. In a market driven by timing and trust, the difference is turning into a strategic advantage and raising the question of how far Canada can push this lead. When you step back, the shift is clear. The Canada-US-India story isn't just a trade change, it marks a deeper turn in the nuclear order. The US still carries weight, but rapid tariffs and political swings make long-term fuel partnerships harder to depend on. Canada, smaller yet more predictable, is moving into the space that instability creates. India's choice may be the first signal that countries seeking uranium minerals, LNG, or clean energy now value reliability over sheer scale. In that context, surpassing the US is about trust, not output. So the question becomes, if stability is the new currency, is Canada emerging as the model for countries wanting distance from volatile superpowers? And while this chapter ends here, the broader story continues. As global energy systems reorganize, the advantage will tilt toward nations that can provide steadiness in a fractured world. Thanks for being here. We'd love to hear what you want to see next, another angle of this story or something entirely different. Drop your ideas below.